On this Thursday night, historic heat. 2021 was the sixth hottest year on record. Another warning: drastic action is needed to tackle climate change.
Well, we really do need to reduce carbon emissions.
Plus, building resiliency, how a First Nation is adapting to withstand climate change. Kids and COVID vaccinations, why isn't it happening faster? The mixed messages and misinformation. Cast out by his mother. The Queen strips Prince Andrew of his royal and military titles. And Spud-tacular donation.
I had this idea.
One man solves two problems with 27,000 kilograms of potatoes.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with the latest data on global warming, which makes it crystal clear temperatures are going up and going up quickly. New data from NASA shows the average global surface temperature in 2021 made it the sixth warmest year on record. Temperatures in North America were on average 1.4 degrees above average, and extreme weather events leading to costly and deadly disasters are happening more often. In 2021, parts of Canada had record-setting heat waves, raging wildfires, severe drought, powerful tornadoes, and heavy flooding. The damage from record flooding in British Columbia is estimated to have cost $7.5 billion. Well, scientists say extreme weather events driven by climate change will continue to accelerate unless bold action is taken. Jackson Proskow reports.
The warning signs are here, and there are more of them than ever. Earth is warming, the climate changing rapidly.
What you see is enormous increases in the rate at which you would see an extreme event. So something that before was a 1 in 100 year event, well, now it's a 1 in 10 year event.
Though 2021 didn't set a record for temperatures, it came close, part of a pattern that has spawned more extreme weather events with greater frequency. In 2021, the Canadian prairies baked as severe drought set in. BC burned, then flooded. Texas froze. Hurricanes delivered unprecedented rain and destruction. Rare December tornadoes walloped the American heartland.
All of these things are now being more and more strongly tied to the fact that we have warmed the planet by more than 1 degree Celsius over the last 100 odd years.
Two things are certain. Humans are to blame, and they're bound to suffer through more extreme events. There's no going back. That means planning and building for a future very much like our present.
Adaptation is also on the table. We really do need to reduce carbon emissions, but we also desperately need to come up with policies that will allow people to adapt to these changes as much as possible.
Though global carbon emissions soared in 2021, experts believe the worst impacts of climate change can still be avoided. They're also realistic about the challenges that lie ahead.
Right now, I think the goal has to be to let's just temper the harshest part, but that's going to require some resolve and some agreement.
There is still optimism that international agreements like COP26 will eventually put the planet on a better track, one where temperatures remain higher but stop climbing.
Right now, we are in control, and what we do as a society, and obviously globally, makes a big difference to what's going to happen in the future.
A future where we live with the realities of today and the consequences of the past. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
And 2022 has started with some extreme weather. Parts of South America are in the middle of a sweltering heat wave right now. This week, Argentina's capital recorded its second highest temperature ever, 41.1 degrees Celsius. Power grids failed, leaving hundreds of thousands of people without electricity. And today, Australia matched its hottest day on record, hitting 50.7 degrees Celsius. It's expected to get even hotter tomorrow. Here in Canada, Lytton, British Columbia holds the record for highest temperature ever recorded in this country. It reached a sweltering 49.6 degrees Celsius last summer, just days before a wildfire tore through the village, destroying most of the homes. The fire also displaced residents living in nearby Kanaka Bar. It's an Indigenous community about 15 kilometers south of Lytton, and it is now preparing to rebuild. As Heather Yourex-West explains, the community has partnered with a team of researchers to design and build homes more resilient to extreme weather.
So this was my kitchen area.
For 25 years, Chief Patrick Michel's family filled their Kanaka Bar home with memories. Until one day last June, under a scorching summer sun, it was gone.
We're all able to leave with nothing but the shirts on our backs.
Oh my God, look at that.
The fire jumped from home to home to home willy-nilly. One of my friends described it as a dragon.
Days after shattering Canada's heat record, hitting a high of 49.6 degrees, both Lytton and Kanaka Bar were on fire. Entire communities of homes and businesses didn't stand a chance.
The homes in Kanaka Bar burned down in about 20 minutes. Part of the problem wasn't so much the fire as it was the thermal transmissivity of the heat.
Weeks after the fire, researchers at Calgary's Southern Alberta Institute of Technology reached out with an offer to help, to not only rebuild the community, but to do it in a way that would withstand future fires, storms, and floods.
We don't want things that will just withstand fire for 10 minutes. We need things that withstand fire for a much longer period of time.
I'm an Indigenous person. I build buildings and infrastructure for the next 100 years for my great-great-grandchildren's use and benefit.
And so, when the first homes are rebuilt this spring, they will be built to last. The community is funding a study that will see researchers from SAIT, Oceanic College, Foresight Canada, and Seco Construction working together to design and build between 4 and 8 test homes able to withstand whatever climate events come next.
People will be moving into them, but we'll be following everyone who's living in them for a year after they occupy the homes. And most importantly, we know there will be more climate events in the region, how those homes stand up to those climate events.
Chief Michel says everything learned from the research in Kanaka Bar will be made available to any community looking to adapt for extreme weather. So the next time that fiery dragon comes to town, those living there can be a little more prepared. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Now to the pandemic. Quebec's premier says hospitalizations in his province have not peaked yet, but cases have, and the province is ready to ease some restrictions. As of Monday, the province-wide 10 p.m. curfew will be lifted. Students are also set to return to in-class learning on Monday. New Brunswick is imposing a new 16-day lockdown to help curb soaring case counts there and hospitalizations. New Brunswick's top doctor says it is a matter of life and death. The province will move to level 3 measures on Saturday morning, the most restrictive. Social gatherings will be limited to single household bubbles. Gyms and entertainment venues will be shut down, and there will be no indoor public gatherings. At-home learning is also being extended to January 31st. Both Newfoundland and Labrador and PEI are delaying the return to in-person learning until at least January 24th because of a spike in cases. PEI's premier says it could be 2 weeks before the Omicron wave begins to subside.
When we open, we want to do everything we can to stay open because we know the starts and stops are even more challenging and troubling for students, teachers, families, and staff.
The provinces and territories are working to vaccinate all eligible children now, but the rates appear to be slowing for kids aged 5 to 11. Just over 45% of children in that age group have received their first dose. Just 2% of 5 to 11-year-olds have both shots. As Jamie Mauracher reports, some parents still have questions about the vaccine.
I think at some point we're just going to end up getting COVID, but I feel better that we at least we have some protection against it.
Morelle Durham is taking her kids to get their second COVID shots, but she's in the minority.
I find this is a missed opportunity because we have a really well-evaluated vaccine also for children.
Parental hesitancy is understandable. Everyone wants only what's best for their kids, but is messaging partly to blame? Our National Advisory Committee on Immunization says 2 doses may be offered to children 5 to 11, not should. And families can face a barrage of misinformation in chat groups and less than credible sources.
There's no doubt in my mind that the effects of the illness itself, both short-term and long-term, are much more detrimental to children than the vaccine.
Health Canada says no safety concerns were found in clinical trials of Pfizer's pediatric shot, and recent data from the U.S., where more than 8.6 million doses have been administered to kids 5 to 11, reveals side effects are exceedingly rare. Calgary pediatric emergency physician Stephen Friedman studied hospitalizations in kids who do get COVID and stresses the importance of vaccination.
What our study shows is if they're severe enough to be hospitalized, they have a risk of a severe adverse outcome.
But shot or not, experts admit Omicron is now changing the landscape.
I think it's really important that we strongly advocate for the vaccines for those who are vulnerable to landing in hospital. That's been the power of the vaccines, and that's still holding true with Omicron. But I also think that we have to be honest about that the vaccines are not, in fact, stopping transmission. If they did, we wouldn't be in this situation.
A situation we have to adapt to, but the science is clear. Vaccination is still the best option we have to protect ourselves and our kids against COVID-19. Jamie Mauracher, Global News, Toronto.
After some confusion today about vaccine rules for Canadian cross-border truck drivers, the federal government now says they will be required to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. On Saturday, unvaccinated truckers will face mandatory testing and isolation. The industry warns that will put more stress on the already strained supply chain. The Canadian Trucking Alliance says it expects to lose 10 to 15% of its cross-border commercial drivers when the mandate takes effect, sidelining 12 to 16,000 truckers. Abigail Beeman reports on the changes and the expected fallout.
I don't agree with this whole vaccine nonsense.
Trucker Lackey MacArthur doesn't want the shot, and a looming edict barring unvaccinated cross-border work won't change that.
There's plenty of loads in Canada. I mean, I'll still be kept busy. It just means the cross-border traffic will...
You're not worried about losing your job?
No.
Come Saturday, new rules mean unvaccinated truckers entering Canada will be subject to testing and quarantine. Wednesday night, the CBSA said Canadian truckers would be exempt. Late Thursday, the Health, Transport and Public Safety Minister said that information was shared in error and there are no exemptions for Canadians. Confusion aside, the issue remains since the United States has a similar policy which comes into force a week later.
So really what has to happen for relief in the supply chain is both Ottawa and Washington need to move simultaneously.
Everything that you get comes by a truck, so if we have less drivers and less trucks on the road, your stores aren't going to fill up as fast.
Existing driver shortages mean there are already supply chain issues. Removing thousands more from the workforce will add pressure.
Increasing the rate per mile.
Some companies have been offering higher pay for cross-border routes or incentives to get vaccinated.
And over the last few weeks, we've really worked really hard with our guys to get them in, help them get booked for vaccines, get them to where they need to be to get the vaccination.
The vast majority of truckers are vaccinated, but the true impact on the supply chain and consumer prices won't be clear for a while. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
Opposition MPs in Ottawa are calling on the federal government to suspend its analysis of Canadians' cell phone location data. Last month, the Public Health Agency of Canada acknowledged it has been purchasing access to the information to analyze the movement of Canadians. Michael Couture reports on the questions about how that data is collected and if Canadians knew about it.
If you've got a cell phone, your mobile carrier is collecting information about your movements every day. That data is often sold, and it turns out the Public Health Agency of Canada has been one of the buyers during the pandemic.
A ping on a map just because you or I went to Costco, how does that impact or how does that affect public health policy?
That question will be put to Canada's top doctor, Theresa Tam, and Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos when they appear before the parliamentary committee looking into this. For now, the Public Health Agency of Canada says that data will be used to analyze the movement of populations in Canada to help inform public health policy during this pandemic. The information gathered was de-identified, meaning no data could be linked to individual Canadians' movements. But privacy experts say it's not bulletproof.
You have to use strong de-identification protocols combined with a risk of re-identification framework that reduces the likelihood of re-identification but doesn't make it impossible.
Some believe this should start a wider conversation about how much of our information is bought and sold without us even knowing.
We're in a context in which there is a need for additional safeguards and oversight when it comes to de-identified data, and we just don't have that in the legislation.
A conversation that's been renewed because of public health, but could help overhaul privacy laws. Michael Couture, Global News, Ottawa.
Thrown out. Coming up, what the Queen has done to Prince Andrew before he faces a sex abuse lawsuit. A dramatic move by the Queen today. She is distancing herself and the royal family from her second son, Prince Andrew. He has been stripped of his military titles and all of his royal patronages and will no longer be known as His Royal Highness. He'll face the sexual abuse lawsuit against him in the U.S. as a private citizen. It's clear the Queen and the military want to shield themselves from any potential outcome. Crystal Gamansing reports.
Prince Andrew is no longer the colonel of the famed Grenadier Guards. All of his military titles have been returned, and he will no longer be known as His Royal Highness. A statement from Buckingham Palace confirming the termination ends by saying the Duke of York will continue not to undertake any public duties and is defending this case as a private citizen. That case is a civil lawsuit in the U.S. brought by Virginia Giuffre, who says Prince Andrew sexually assaulted her when she was 17, a claim he denies and unsuccessfully tried to have thrown out of court.
This is very definitely the Queen distancing herself in her Platinum Jubilee year, 70 years on the throne, a unique achievement, and someone who has given devoted service. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of all her family.
Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliam says Andrew has simply become toxic. The reputational damage is done. More than 100 veterans had urged the Queen to take action, writing, "We are particularly upset and angry that Prince Andrew remains a member of the armed forces and continues to hold military titles, positions, and ranks, including that of Vice Admiral of the Royal Navy. In Windsor, Brits are standing by the Queen."
I think the Queen will rise above it. She's been around for a very long time, and she's an extremely wise and sensible lady.
Now, this is not the first royal scandal, but it does hit close to home. It's the first time the Queen has had to take such action against one of her own sons. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Ahead, a landmark war crimes verdict against a former Syrian officer. There is a landmark court verdict in a war crimes case involving Syrians who suffered abuse or lost relatives at the hands of Bashar al-Assad's regime. A German court sentenced a former Syrian colonel to life in prison for crimes against humanity. Anwar Razlan is linked to the torture of at least 4,000 people at a prison outside of Damascus a decade ago. It is the first ever conviction on charges of state-backed torture committed during Syria's civil war.
It's a recognition of the crimes committed in Syria. So I hope that this sentence and this verdict will be a strong base for future work.
Razlan denied the allegations against him. He fled Syria in 2012 and went to Germany, where police began investigating his background. Survivors of torture in Syria have had limited options for justice. Western powers have tried to refer cases to the International Criminal Court, but those attempts have been blocked by Russia and China. It's hoped this case will be a blueprint for future prosecutions. Spuds of kindness next. A Quebec man chips in big to help Prince Edward Island. So this is Henrietta, an adventurous pet chicken who flew the coop in dramatic fashion last weekend. Henrietta lives in the garage of a Nova Scotia plumbing business and snuck onto a truck as a stowaway. Not the first time she's done that, they say. She likes to travel. She made it to a town about 10 minutes away and was found wandering the streets and was taken in by a wildlife shelter. Henrietta has since made the trip back home, safe and sound. Well, we could all use some more uplifting news these days. So tonight we leave you with a story about making the best of a tough situation. It involves PEI potatoes and one man's effort to help solve two problems at once. Here's Mike Armstrong.
Yeah.
They are a staple. In fact, potatoes are about as basic a staple as they get. Sam Watts goes through a lot of them, and thankfully right now has a lot of them. Watts runs the Welcome Hall mission in Montreal. Its food bank helps about 2,500 people a week. Add to that the hundreds and hundreds it feeds every day.
In our kitchens, we're making about 7,000 meals every week. That can use up a lot of potatoes.
Now, the fact Watts' warehouse is fully stocked with potatoes is thanks to a donation by this man. Mac Watson is a retired geologist who wanted to help. The twist is, it wasn't the mission that was the inspiration.
In the middle of the night, about 3 weeks ago, I had this idea.
Watson had been following news of the situation in PEI. After 2 cases of a potato fungus were found in October, Ottawa banned exports to the U.S. PEI potato farmers had just had one of their best years in memory and are now looking at huge losses.
It's extremely tough. We've all lost a bit of our ambition, our love for what we do.
Farmer Robin Stein says he may have to destroy as much as 70% of his crop. Province-wide, about $120 million worth of potatoes can't go to market. It was Stein who sold the trailer load to the Montreal Mission. It was only a drop in the bucket, but one he appreciates.
It was a wonderful thing to be a part of.
People outside the province are thinking about them.
Watson says there was a message in what he did. He wanted the farmers to know the rest of the country cares. Well, PEI wasn't the only place that heard that message. The mission says it's already gotten calls from people wanting to donate and other missions in the country looking for help setting up something similar. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Okanagan Lake near Kelowna, BC. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching and hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.